Well, good Friday evening to you all. This is meteorologist Mike Ottenweller tuning in to your Alaska weather. Thanks for joining us tonight, November 30th, 2018. For those of you across the state of Alaska, we hope you are doing well after the rather significant earthquake this morning here in south central Alaska. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but I hope everyone is safe and finding shelter tonight after the fairly significant event this morning. As always, if you need to get in touch with our office or any of the offices across the region, 1-800-472-0391. Weather.gov/Alaska will get you whatever weather you need as you start to pick up the pieces. And nws.ar.tv weather at noaa.gov is how you can get in touch with Mr. Dave Snider if you have input on the Alaska Weather Show. So let's jump right in. So our magnitude 7.0 earthquake, a fairly significant earthquake across the region, 13 kilometers north of Anchorage, so not far away at all from our largest population center in the state. If you need assistance tonight, reach out to your emergency management teams. They are the ones who are providing information on where to go or what you can do if you have repairs that need to be done. If you know damage across the roadways. So talk to your local emergency management officials and they will be the ones to guide you towards the next step. Strong system going to bring winter weather into the interior portion of the state, and that is already starting to take shape as we go underway this evening. And warm weather is going to be brought into southern mainland courtesy of this system. As Kimberley talked about yesterday, this warm weather, warm air mass has not changed much, and so we'll see some more of that. And then windy conditions are going to be expected from Anchorage all the way up through the Alaska range, and this will primarily be Saturday afternoon into Sunday time frame, Saturday afternoon and Saturday evening. So on into our hazards map. Well, as you can see, it's a very active map. The only place that's devoid of any hazards is down in southeast Alaska, where things are actually relatively quiet and keeping things somewhat balanced, because across the rest of the state we have plenty to talk about. Up here we have winter weather watches. Most of these are primarily in effect for Saturday into Sunday. As we get down here towards the western portion of the state, these are all winter weather warnings from the Fairbanks office, and again starting either tonight or early overnight into Saturday night. A lot of these are in effect for snow and some blowing snow, reduced visibilities, and even some mixed precipitation. Some warmer air creeping up, so we also have some mixed precipitation expected. All of the yellow is your winter weather advisories, and then here across south central, winter weather advisory for this is Sitna Valley for snow, mainly north of Talkeetna up near Broad Pass, and then this will be in effect for tomorrow and Saturday. And then high wind warning for the Alaska range here, and again this is primarily starting tonight and going through Saturday. And then even along the west coast here, we also have some high surf advisories that are in effect for portions of the Seward Peninsula, so be advised of the folks that are traveling out near there without much ice pack in the way. There has been plenty of wave action associated with this system, and so it will bring those waves and higher surf up into the Nome area. Again, if you need more details on that, please tune into your local office and they can get you the latest information. So here we go on our satellite loop, and here is our system that is going to bring us the challenging forecast for the next couple days. It is a fairly warm system coming from the North Pacific, moving towards southwest Alaska. Already starting to see radar returns coming in from the King Salmon and maybe even some off the Bethel radar. Not quite seeing precipitation into the Cook Inlet region just yet, but it is starting to spread up from Kodiak through the Kenai Peninsula. Pretty clear skies across much of the mainland portion of the state. However, there has been some low clouds and some fog over eastern portions of the interior. And then again, relatively quiet up along the Arctic coastline with just some strong easterly winds, but those winds will continue to increase. Some pockets of some blowing snow would not be out of the question. Let's take a look at that satellite loop again. And as you can see here, down towards southeast Alaska, you guys are all looking pretty good down there. Pretty quiet weather for you all with high pressure still sliding over top of the area in advance of this system. And let's look at it again with a little bit different view. Here you can see those high clouds just starting to spread over Anchorage with that next system pushing in. And then a pretty quiet day for Juneau. Some of that low stuff kind of hard to see on the infrared satellite because it looks like it's the ground, but it's actually just low clouds. And then out towards the Aleutians, we can see another system kind of decaying out over here. The system is weakening, but it is swinging back in some colder air and helping to create some shower activity, cold air advection, snow showers across that area. And one more time, there's that primary system we're talking about, a weak warm front in advance of this, helping to kind of usher in the first tier of warm air, and we'll talk about that as we get to our surface maps. So what does that look like for tonight? Well, just on the leading edge of this warm air is where we can expect a little bit of that mixed precipitation. Should start out as snow, but then eventually turning to a rain-snow mix. And by the time you get to the Alaska Peninsula this evening, it is all rain and starting to move into the Kodiak area as well. Like I mentioned, just not quite into the Cook Inlet region just yet, but creeping up the inlet as we speak. Some rain showers across the northern portion of the Gulf, but otherwise mostly high and dry across southeast Alaska with a fairly nice day there. Some fog has been trapped along the eastern portion of the interior, but that should dissipate as these winds start to pick up. You notice the tight isobars around this system. These lines here are the lines of equal pressure, and that's what's going to help to bring those winds up. It's indicative of those stronger winds due to the tight pressure gradient. As we get up towards the Arctic coastline, just a few snow showers, but that's about ready to be replaced by a lot of steady snow and not showery in nature, but persistent, henceforth the advisories and the warnings out. And then the snow showers wrapping across the western portion of the domain. As we look into tonight, that's where we see the system really start to pick up its strength and push into the area. We'll start to see snowfall across much of the Susitna Valley, start to see some rain and snow and possibly freezing rain mixing in here near the Kuskokwim Valley and areas like McGrath. And so again, the winter weather advisory is in effect for those areas. And then up along the Brooks Range in the interior portion of the state, steady snow moving in overnight tonight. On the backside of this, still some warm air helping to create some rain out over St. Lawrence Island, and rain again certainly in spades as we get down towards the Alaska Peninsula and into Bristol Bay, also pushing that warmer air into South Central and Prince William Sound. Those areas you should start to see anything that starts out as snow will quickly turn over to rain. Just some rain showers as we look towards southeast Alaska, mainly in the offshore waters, and then the snow showers out west with some rain showers in advance of our next system, a tightly wound system that we'll see really ramp up on Friday, and ramp up in terms of how much precipitation is associated with it. Plenty of rain and fog conditions out there over the Aleutian chain, central Aleutians, and on into the Alaska Peninsula. Excuse me, this is Saturday. Map is mislabeled, but Saturday's weather, we'll start to see the rain start to push into Bristol Bay as we start to see that system drift off to the north. Rain-snow mix will start to move a little bit further north, and then again the snow continuing over much of the western portion of the state. As we get up towards the Arctic coastline, not a whole lot going on up there just yet, but it will be rather foggy in advance of this system with that warm air. And then as we look towards the Gulf of Alaska, still pretty quiet for southeast Alaska. Some rain and snow mixed in there along the northern Gulf Coast, and snow returning back into Anchorage, but it should be mixed with rain and quickly turning over to rain, unfortunately, on that nice fresh snow that we have out there. And then more snow with that next system way out to the west. Here we are now into Sunday, and we can see yet another system developing out towards the southwestern portion of the Aleutians, then on into the southern portion of the state. Still more rain expected for the Gulf Coast, so it's going to be a soggy weekend for you all down there. Snow continues for the interior portions, but probably too much warm air for Cook Inlet to keep things all keep things all snow, so we'll see some rain mix in for you all. And then up towards the Seward Peninsula, that's where we have those snow showers. Will linger into Sunday, but the worst of it certainly looks to be Saturday. Another area of low pressure will keep the gusty easterly winds going along the Arctic coastline for Sunday for you folks up there, and then fairly calm conditions continue for southeast Alaska. Now, how about for our temperatures? Well, you can see here across much of the mainland, things are looking pretty warm as we get towards the southern mainland. Southeast Alaska, you'll have temperatures ranging all the way from the lower 30s into the upper 20s. And then as you climb a little bit closer to the interior portions of the state and in the higher elevations, you'll start to see our low temperatures on Saturday morning dropping into the mid to low 20s. As we get towards the eastern portion of the state, that's where we have plenty of colder temperatures with that cold air and the high pressure remaining in control. So you can expect anywhere from single digits to just below zero here up in the upper Tanana Valley, about -1. Up along the Arctic coastline, we expect temperatures below zero again tonight. Those should be rebounding as we go into Sunday morning. But for tonight, with mostly clear skies, still expecting temperatures to be relatively cold there. And then you can see our dividing line of where that warm front has already started to make its impact. So you have temperatures going from single digits all the way up into the mid-20s and even the low 30s once you get down towards the Kenai Peninsula. So that's really where we see that transition from a snow to a rain snow, possibly some freezing rain in pockets, and then eventually all rain as you get out towards Bristol Bay. King Salmon coming in at 40 degrees. Bethel should hang in there right around freezing at about 32 degrees. Fairbanks, you're going to be all the way down at 7. And then over the Alaska Peninsula, you can expect temperatures near 40 on Saturday morning. Pretty warm. And then as we go into Saturday afternoon, that's where we see that surge of warm air continue to push in towards the Alaska Range, through the Alaska Range, I should say, and up into the Tanana Valley, into the Brooks Range. So expect temperatures along the Arctic coastline to hold there near about 10 in some of the single digits. Along the eastern portion of the interior, holding right around 10 again, but then towards Fairbanks, you're all the way up to 23 by Saturday afternoon, a pretty big jump. Towards south central Alaska, you can expect temperatures in the mid-30s, henceforth a very messy, sloppy day as far as precipitation type. Over the Aleutians, you can expect temperatures in the 40s, even all the way up to near 45 degrees there for Sandpoint. And for southeast Alaska, you folks are looking at temperatures rebounding once again into the mid-30s, a little bit colder of the higher elevations, but warming up down towards the southeastern portion of the state into near 40. For Sunday morning, temperatures once again fairly clear skies, so we'll see things drop down to near 30 on Sunday morning. A little bit colder in the upper 20s for the northern portions of southeast Alaska. Only seeing a few single digits and just a little bit of below zero there in the eastern Copper River Basin by Sunday morning. Otherwise, most everybody has rebounded above 10 degrees and even above freezing for much of the Gulf Coast areas, Prince William Sound, and even out towards southwest Alaska with 33 degrees expected at King Salmon. A little bit more mild weather for the western portion of the state as well, with temperatures near the 30-degree mark and then near 35 to 40 for the Alaska Peninsula. On into Sunday, seeing that warm air continue for much of the western portion of the state and even spreading to the eastern portion with near 35 to 40 for southeast Alaska. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more of your Alaska weather.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, let's move on up into your flying weather now, and as you can see here, MVFR conditions with that southerly flow across much of the state, really quite prevalent, stretching across the northern portion of the Gulf of Alaska, off into portions of southeast Alaska, and then very extensive across western and northwestern Alaska, even across the Brooks Range here with that southerly flow just helping to feed moisture into the state, and certainly out over the Bering Sea where we don't have a strong system, we do have low marine stratus hanging out, creating MVFR conditions as well. Along the west coast, a fairly wide swath of IFR conditions, and again, that's because of that warm, moist air moving over the colder land, colder air masses, and then another piece of IFR here near Kodiak and one towards the Prince William Sound. On into Saturday afternoon, things improve somewhat with the help of the daytime heating, the limited daytime heating albeit, and then still MVFR across the Gulf. IFR pockets across South Central, but generally an MVFR ceiling and mostly ceiling. Some visibilities will be reduced with some snow showers and rain showers. And then along the west coast of Alaska, there's where we have that wider swath of IFR conditions. Out over the Bering, it's keeping things MVFR with that new system bringing some IFR conditions into the central Aleutians. Sunday morning now, you can see MVFR conditions still remaining quite prevalent across the southern half of the state, stretching really all the way from southeast to southwest Alaska, and then embedded pockets once again of IFR conditions across these areas with the stronger jet activity associated with those new areas of low pressure. One small pocket of IFR along the northwest coast there near Point Lay, but otherwise MVFR fairly widespread, except along the Arctic coastline there, a small reprieve from those conditions with some downsloping winds moving up and over the Brooks Range. And then into Sunday afternoon, well, again, southerly flow, not going to see a lot of improvement across much of the areas, especially featuring areas that are upsloped where the moisture is backing up against terrain. So MVFR along the Brooks Range, MVFR across much of South Central with a fairly wide swath of IFR moving in by Sunday afternoon, especially along the Kenai Peninsula, and then MVFR here along the west coast and stretching out towards St. Lawrence Island. A new area of IFR conditions moving into the western Aleutians as well by Sunday afternoon. Starting out with our passes then, we can see Anaktuvik Pass is going to go from MVFR to IFR. Atigun will go from MVFR to IFR. We'll see Lake Clark and Merrill hold steady at IFR instrument flight rules through the day. Rainy should improve from IFR to MVFR, but it will be a slow improvement. Same story for Windy there in the Alaska Range. Isabel should be MVFR marginal visual flight rules through the day. Mentasta, marginal visual flight rules. Tanita, IFR through the day. And Portage, IFR through the day. So not a great flying day on Saturday. Chilkoot and White, you're going to be in the best shape with MVFR improving to visual flight rules. How about that freezing line? Well, you can see it's pretty much hung up across the portions of the Gulf Coast, stretching all the way towards the Prince William Sound. Then it creeps inland a little bit more where some colder air has been able to make its way into southwest Alaska. Here's that area of warmer air starting to slide up though, and that's really what we're keying in on to create some more mixed precipitation, rain and snow, possibility of some freezing rain. So that area of 4,000 foot freezing levels is our concern. And then stretching out over the west coast and out into the Aleutians, not as much warm air out there, so keeping things a little bit more steady in the snow precipitation type. As far as icing, well, it's going to be fairly widespread. When you bring that warm air mass from the North Pacific up into the state this time of year, you get a lot of icing, mixed precipitation, especially in areas where we have any freezing rain. Of course, that would be considered severe icing. And otherwise, it's going to be a general isolated moderate across the western portion of the state and across much of the interior portions of South Central. But then once we get into the areas along the ranges, along the Alaska Range and the Brooks Range, that's where it's going to be considerable moderate. So be advised if you have any aviation plans on Saturday, it's going to be a very icy day in those areas. How about the jet stream? Well, you can see here it comes in diving north to south at 135, sweeps in underneath this low at 155, climbing up over this ridge here, and that's what's really helping to pump that warm, moist air into the state at 80 knots, and then dropping back down. This ridge of high pressure not really doing a whole lot for us other than bringing some more moisture and warm air. Dives out of the state at about 80 to 95 knots. So how does that look at 9,000 feet? Well, it's a pretty general southerly flow and really focusing in here at about 70 knots across much of the Alaska Range and interior portions of the state. Coming up and over this ridge, not too strong at about 15 to 20 knots, and then generally kind of keeping that cyclonic flow at about 40 knots across the Bering. Not a lot of change here at 3,000 feet, still having our strongest winds over the interior portion of the state and generally a northwest flow out over southeast Alaska. Keeping things pretty quick turn out of the east along the Arctic coastline there, 30 to 40 knots, so be advised of that sharp turn. And what does that look like for turbulence? Well, it's going to be fairly widespread and really keen on the center portion of the state below 9,000 feet, even some possibilities of some isolated severe, and then another pocket of considerable moderate below 4,000. Stay tuned.
That's the first question is, what is this thing? And then it's followed by how did it die, how did you get it, how did it get cleaned? Some of these animals have a story of their life and sometimes their death in the bones. My name is Lee Post, skeleton articulator, museum preparator, osteology fanatic. Comes down to, okay, I'm just a nature nerd. Homer was kind of a place that you could reinvent yourself real easily. I came here as a bike mechanic, but the museum, that was my fantasy life as a kid. I always wanted to work in a museum. There's lots of dead things, there's lots of natural history things. Bones were my passion, and they had a whale. And they said their plans were to put it together for the museum. It's like, oh, can I help, can I help? And they're like, yeah. So I figured I'll just order a book on how to put sperm whales together, right? Well, not only was there no book on that, there was no books on how to put any kind of whale together that I could find. So that led to, I've seen big whales in museums. I'm going to call these places and find out how they did it. Surely they have something in print. Turned out they had nothing in print. Can I talk to the people that did it? And they're like, oh, these were done 100 years ago or more by people who didn't leave any directions on how they did it. And so we reinvented how to put whales together. Homer was a great town to do this in because I got all these boat builders and carpenters and artists, and that was so much fun. We went to Sea Lion, I went to Eagle, and every year I would do a skeleton or two. I was keeping track in the notebook of everything that I did that worked or didn't work over the years, and that kind of led to a series of 10 volumes of bone building books. And now they're kind of the go-to books that pretty much anybody uses if they're pretty serious about doing this. First major obstacle, difficulty to get past is you need the bones clean enough. Okay, yeah, you can simmer this, you can boil it, you can macerate it. There's all kinds of ways of getting the meat off of it. but getting the oils out, especially marine mammal bones. They're heavily saturated with oils. There's also an issue of getting all the bones, like this coyote that we're working on. I'm not sure quite the circumstances of its death, but the head was in about 40 pieces, so I know it wasn't too conducive to life with what happened with what was left over of the head. Next obstacle is laying it all out, put the vertebrae all in order, match up all the ribs, right, left, put them in pairs, sort out the legs, front from back, left from right. From there, I usually start with the feet. Most mammals, the feet have more than half the bones in the entire body because it's so many little tiny bones. And then usually from there, then we'll go to the backbone, and then, you know, it becomes like the song, all the bones that fasten to the other bones. You know, if we can pull it off right, it's that skeleton doing what it does in the natural world and looking like it's not a pile of bones, it is an animal in movement.
It looks so good.
It does.
You know, it used to be that the image was that only people in the, call it the ivory basements of the museum, ever got to put together bones. You know, and the reality in this day and age is they don't even get to put bones together. They hire this out to somebody like me. I had an opportunity to work with Homer High and the Pratt Museum on a collaborative project where they put together a 41-foot sperm whale and hung it up in the school. That was kind of the awakening of, okay, I can put skeletons together myself, but the magic of, and the vicarious thrills of watching other people who never dreamed that they could be putting these marine mammal skeletons together on their own was, to me, as thrilling, if not more thrilling, than doing it myself. So I get a lot of questions. I'm interested in working on bones, and I really want to put bones together for a living. How do I do this? Just do it. You know, it's that cliche saying of follow your passion, and you know, eventually, you can get there. It's follow your dream. You know, it's possible to find something dead, farm animal maybe, a hunted animal, roadkill, clean it up, you know, go for it.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And now for your marine forecast, and we'll start off with our sea ice slide. As you can see the date up there, November 29th, don't be worried about that. This is, in fact, today's analysis. And so our sea ice is looking like this. The pack ice is continuing to hold tight against the Prudhoe Bay and north coast there, up towards Dead Horse and Utqiagvik. And then as we get down towards the Bering Strait region here, start to see it open up just a little bit more. The pack ice is remaining strong, but still working on that marginal ice there. And the shore fast ice continues to build here near Point Lay and Point Hope. And then continuing to build as well down towards portions of southwest Alaska, near Macquarie there, Nunivak Island. And we'll start to see ice continue for today, but then as that southerly flow returns, expect some of this to be impinged upon, possibly even broken up a little bit, all the way up basically to the Seward Peninsula as those warm winds start to push against that ice pack. How about for our Saturday marine forecast? Well, as you can see here for much of southeast Alaska, the inner passageways are generally a northerly wind to northwest at 15 knots, and seas are going to be running about 3 feet. Up towards the northern portion of the Gulf Coast, you can see about 10 to 15 knots out of the east and seas about 6 feet. Down towards the southern portion of the outer waters, northwest to northerly winds, 15 to 20 knots on a 7 to 8, even up to 9-foot sea there near Craig. And then on into Sunday now, looking for northerly winds to dominate the interior waters. 20 knots for Lynn Canal, but then dropping down to 15 and 10 for Stevens Passage area, and seas about 2 to 3 feet, except for 4 feet up there in Lynn Canal. And then for the offshore or outer waters, expect kind of a variable wind, easterly, becoming northerly, and then back to easterly. Generally fairly light, about 10 knots across the outer waters, and seas between 8 and 10 feet. Then on into Saturday for south central portions of Alaska and off in the northern Gulf. You can expect generally a southerly to southwesterly wind across the open waters, 25 to 35 knots, and seas between 8 and 12 feet. Prince William Sound still pretty gusty there, 25 knots out of the southeast, 6-foot seas, and those strong winds will make their way all the way up Cook Inlet, 40 to 45 knots. So be advised, if you have any travel plans through there, it is going to be rough conditions and 11 to 16-foot seas out there. On into Sunday now, starting to see things come down as that front has moved through. Generally a southeast wind, except for northern Cook Inlet, which comes northeasterly, anywhere between 20 and 25 knots, climbing all the way up to 35 knots there near the Barren Islands. Seas between 3 and 12 feet for the Cook Inlet region, and for the Gulf, between about 4 feet for Prince William Sound, climbing up to 8 to 9 feet there over the open waters. How about for Saturday near the Alaska Peninsula? Well, generally expect a subtly generic direction, anywhere from southwest and a little bit more subtly there towards Kodiak Island. 40 to 45 knots on the average, and seas are going to be fairly high, all the way up to 23 feet here near Sandpoint, and about 14 to 15 feet north of the peninsula. On into Sunday, our next system is starting to develop, but we start to see those winds just hanging on as a southwest wind, 20 to 25 knots near Kodiak Island, and seas between 5 and 14 feet. And then north of the peninsula, 30 knots out of the southwest, 12 to 13 foot seas. How about for our Saturday afternoon for the Aleutians? Well, you can see here generally a westerly wind throughout the area, except a little bit more confused there near the area of low pressure, 30 to 45 knots, and seas generally 13 to 17 feet. And then on into Sunday, that's where our next system really starts to creep in. That strong compact low that we talked about, anywhere from 40 knots all the way down to 20 knots, and seas generally between 12 and 14 feet. And then out towards the western Aleutians, easterly winds becoming northerly, and that's where we'll see 40 to 45 knots. For the west coast, generally a southwest wind, 30 to 35 knots, except there 45 knots south of Nunivak Island, and seas running between 6 all the way up to 15 feet. And then on Sunday, more of a westerly flow, except just to the east near Nome there, where we have that high surf advisory, and expect 20 to 25, maybe even 30 knots, seas generally between 6 and 13 feet. For the Arctic coastline, 20 knots to 30 knots out of the east along the Arctic coast, and then becoming more 30 to 35 along the northwest coast, and seas will be generally about 7 feet to 10 feet down by Savunga. On Sunday, more of a southerly push across the area, 20 to 25 knots, and seas again between about 9 and 11 feet there off the west coast. So recapping tonight's weather, well, we'll see that storm system move in, possibly hampering some recovery efforts as people work on the roads that were damaged today near from the earthquake. So some snow for the Susitna Valley developing tonight, snow pushing all the way up, a wide variety of winter weather advisories, warnings, and watches in effect to include some high surf. And this weather will continue on into Saturday as that snow pushes inland. And then by Sunday, we finally start to see an improvement in conditions with some lingering snow across South Central. Thanks for joining us this evening, and hope you're safe.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.